Ruh-roh, we got a problem here. Make sure you guys smash the living crap out of that subscribe button so you guys don't miss out on more awesome content. Oh boy, the top 64 breakdown is here, and this is disgusting. We had 71% of top cut. Think about that. That's 29% that is not covered by Ishizu tier elements. Congratulations, Konami. I understand why the community wants to see an emergency ban list at this point, because stuff like this, where you have such a dominating force like this is why I mentioned on the top end of things right now, this format is disgusting. But when you recede down into, you know, the regional level and down into the localized level, it doesn't look quite that bad, which I think is a good thing. So yeah, Ishizu tier being the most represented deck. Is anybody here surprised at all? No? Okay. I would be surprised if you were for this point. Now the counters in the room. All right. We had, this is actually kind of interesting. 11% Floowandereeze. Now, Flounder's been holding on for dear life out here. They have actually proven to us that they are the counter to Ishizu tier. The big thing with the deck, though, is you have to play very correctly. Flounder's a deck that does not reward bad playing. And I think it is also a very safe bet from a lot of players' perspective. And I understand that, but man, that I'm shocked right now by that Ishizu tier elements turnover. Like that deck, ugh. And then Flounder, yeah, I'm not surprised by that. Now, this is interesting. Only 6% Spright. Now, Spright and actually Spright tier elements got lumped up into the same category. I am not shocked to see that number, honestly. Spright has been honestly a pretty interesting deck this format. You know, and by interesting I mean literally you're like Nimble Beaver, sprint go, you know, take your opponent into time, sprint drop the scatter shot. That's kind of the tier experience right now. The loss of Ronin Tonin really set the deck back to, you know, the Stone Ages, and it's actually something interesting to see that, you know. Spright, I guess, being the third best deck in the room, with Flaunder finally surpassing it. So, sorry, you gotta give me, like, reality is sitting in here. I'm looking at this format, and I'm like, this is as bad as it actually looks, you know. Like, you can't make up these numbers and things and be, you know, genuinely shocked by this. Now, one interesting thing here is Runic actually has some decent representation in here, in the form of Natsuri Runic and the regular Runic. Now, I will say this, and there seems to be some misconception here when people are looking at Runic this format. People seem to, obviously, Mystic Mine is one of the best cards that Runic has going for it. I don't want to discredit that, all right? Mystic Mine is going to be an amazing aiding tool for this, so I want to point that out there. But people seem to think that Runic is dead as a deck because Ishizu tier elements can supposedly shuffle back the targets via the field spell. I understand that. But you have to remember, Runic can also do the exact same thing to you. There are builds that are popping up out here that are messing around with the concept of playing those Ishizu cards in Runic. Alright? That means that those very same players are going to be taking advantage of, you know, the same methods. And who's to say that I'm going to trigger my field spell when I could use my Agito, or excuse me, my Kelbeck and my Mudora to shuffle back your Kelbeck and Mudora so that those options become used, and then I can safely activate my field spell. The other thing is, in regards to Runic this format, you know, you are going to be, if you are playing the Ishizu package in your deck, like, or you're playing against the Ishizu tier, you're going to mill those spell cards. That means that once you see a field spell, you are good to go. All right, that's one other thing that I think people seem to understand or don't get with that matchup is, well, I guess people just don't get Runic at all, because I've already read comments from people like, what's Runic's win condition? Decking the opponent out. Alright? That's why Runic has such a good matchup this format too, is because Ishizu tier just goes, haha, mill everything. And then, you know, the Runic player's like, oh, you know, hold my drink as I proceed to, you know, further mill you out. Now, the other interesting Runic deck here is the Naturia version. And I've seen this pop up a little bit. It is actually where you use the Naturia package to basically do mole crickets, nothing is more disgusting than putting a Naturia beast on the field and then proceed to do full Runic combo while you're like, oh boy, all these cards that I'm drawing, this is awesome. You know, being able to use Stink Bug for the protection, using, you know, the double negates that you can set up for Naturia cards in general. Honestly, I do think that the Runic version of Naturia is kind of scary. And I know a lot of people haven't really explored that option tree or haven't given it much of a thought per se. But I do think that that is something that you should be aware of out here, was people were messing around with the concept of Naturia with Runic, just because you get a little bit of an extra buff in between. And as you can see here, Runic, multiple versions being available here, actually is kind of impressive at the overall end of the day. So I will give it to that category. Runic doing its job out here. All right. Thank you, Mystic Mind. You make this game tolerable right now. All right. Now, interesting other things here. I see the Madolche has a 3% representation. And I've already been reading comments from people going, what year is this? How did Madolche, of all things, creep into a format with Ishizu tier elements? Well, if you can go second and break your opponent's board, or, you know, go first and make the most ignorant board you can, I'm not really too sure with Candy Treats what they were doing there. I definitely, 3% is kind of interesting for a turnover, to say the least. But when it's top 64, you're going to have some sort of interesting rogue deck, you know, creak through the cracks. That's just how it works. We see it every single time. Now, how far Madolche will get today, I am actually more intrigued with. Hopefully it's just not a one and done in the top cut, but we'll have to wait and see. That gives me some hope for when we get to see deck profiles later on in the day here, you know, what kind of interesting things were actually coming out of that. Now, we had Draco Slayer in top cut. You know what? I've been seeing Draco Slayer do things on the regional level, which is actually kind of nice. The deck, very skill intensive in my opinion. You have to step through the pendulum combos. You have to know what you need to do in order to set up the most optimized boards at the end of the day. It is not a deck that you can really pick up at the end of the day and just be like, oh, I'm the master of this. I know everything on the first pickup. It's kind of nice to have something that requires a decent amount of step through and, you know, knowing the pendulum patterns in order to set up. I am glad to see that pendulum's kind of back on the map here. It's not in the best way that you could see possible here, but we're getting places here. All right. And then we also had one Mystic Mind burn deck. You know what? Mystic Mind bum. You know, you hate to see it, but like, you know, what is it? The enemy of my enemy is my friend, or the friend of my enemy, whatever the old saying is here. But, and in terms of everything that you've seen here for this breakdown, one, you shouldn't be surprised about this. Number two, I want to point out that I think Flunder's starting to have a lot more success here, because setting up N-Pen, Ishizu tier doesn't have a genuine like good out for it. So going first makes Floowandereeze a much better option. And I know a lot more people all of a sudden are like, oh my gosh, you know, like Flunder is becoming an annoyance more so now than ever. But I mean, Rogue was like the reason why Flunder didn't succeed, and when you check Rogue out of the format, then you have something like this happen where, you know, the pest birds grow and grow. And then of course, no Sword Soul, no branded anywhere to be seen. All right, insert X deck didn't make top cut here, but you're 71% engrossing of that top cut turnover. I mean, what do you really expect? Though I will once again will say, Runic and Madolche are I'm rooting for them. I'm rooting for Runic because I love deck out. I think it's such an interesting method to play the game, but I do genuinely want to see Candy Treats get a W here, because that would be so wild. But hey, Konami, it's now 2 events. Looking at you, Ishizu tier elements. I will tell you from some of the regionals I've seen out of this week, it is very Ishizu tier element heavy, but, you know, on the regional level, there is hope, all right? And that's one interesting thing. That's why players like challenging formats like this to topple the Titan. So what do you think? Please, comment down below, tell me what you guys think, and I'll see your beautiful faces back here later in the day, guys. Peace out. Patrons, thank you. Ugh.
Thank you so much for watching. Check out these other videos.